We're rebuilding America. We're going to invest in America and build a better America than we found. And for the better part of the 20th century, we used to lead the world by a significant margin because we invested in ourselves. We invested in our infrastructure, our roads, our highways, bridges, ports, airports, the arteries of the nation that allow commerce to function smoothly and move swiftly. And we invested in our people and in opportunity. We're among the first nations to provide universal high school at the turn of the 20th century.
Joe Manchin is urging that the Biden administration take immediate action to address the rising inflation that is affecting millions of Americans. Monthly relief benefits, everybody, will finally see an increase this year for millions of people. Social Security checks, stimulus payments are coming your way. And I'm glad to see that President Biden is actually taking some steps to help the American people out. Now, Manchin has officially sounded the alarm after the Labor Department announced that annual inflation had risen at the fastest rate in 4 decades, emphasizing that Congress should not add more fuel to an economy already on fire. Manchin is concerned about how Democrats want to pass a roughly $2 trillion spending and climate package. Manchin has already cited concerns about inflation and the cost of the bill. In an official statement, Manchin said inflation is draining the hard-earned wages for every American and causing real severe and economic pain. Joe Manchin also added that it is beyond time for the Federal Reserve to tackle this issue head-on. According to the Labor Department, everybody, consumer prices increased 7.5% annually in the year ending in January, marking the fastest rate since February 1982. It was the 6th consecutive month the Consumer Price Index, which tracks inflation, actually rose on an annual basis. In January alone, consumer prices increased by 0.6%, and that's a lot. And that's the same speed as December. In the previous 3 months, however, the rate had dropped. Manchin said the threat of inflation is real, and it's time we start acting like stewards of our economy and the money that the American people entrust their government with. Now more than ever, we must remember it's not our money. It's the American people's money, and it's their economy. Now, I do agree, friends, that lawmakers in Congress have the responsibility, the sole duty of pretty much taking care of the American people with stimulus checks and Social Security benefits. Now, if Congress fails to take action, the more economic pain will be caused. The U.S. has grappled with elevated inflation levels since the middle of 2021, when the country began rebounding from losses. That recovery, however, drove prices to levels not seen in decades, as high demand coincided with low supply, labor shortages, and shipping problems. But there is some good news. SNAP beneficiaries are seeing a big increase this year in monthly benefits. Back in 1933, during the height of the Great Depression, the SNAP benefit program was built out as part of the Agricultural Adjustment Act. The purpose of the program was to support farmers who are struggling to stay afloat when burdened with excess supply and diminished demand. So about 100 years later, SNAP is the largest federal food assistance program in the country, with 1 in 7 Americans enrolled. According to an official statement by the USDA, SNAP allotments will be increased for 2022 for many states across the nation. That means more people are receiving boosted benefits, which will really help them during this time. As of today, 37 states have enlisted to make their residents eligible for this. Progressive economists have long argued that SNAP benefits need to be greater in order to finally address the food insecurity crisis. Even with the long overdue increase, many SNAP recipients are struggling to get by and typically through no fault of their own. So should SNAP benefits be increased? Tell me what you think in the comments down below, everybody.
Century. We invested to win the space race that facilitates in facilities like Lewis Research Center in Cleveland, which is now named for my buddy John Glenn, God rest his soul. And we led the world in research and development and led the creation of the internet. But somewhere along the way, we took our eye off the ball. Our infrastructure used to be rated number 1 in the world. Today, according to the World Economic Forum, we rank number 13 in the world. China and the rest of the world is catching up and passing us. But now, with our infrastructure law, we're reinvesting in our economy and in our people, reclaiming our leadership and creating millions of jobs for building a better America. That's what we're going to do. But as we rebuild America, we're buying American and betting on American workers.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Peters, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been listening for a while, and it strikes me as the one thing we've learned from the debt ceiling discussion is that the debt ceiling is not the answer. Whatever the problem is, the existence of the debt ceiling is not keeping us from being $30 trillion in debt. And the reason is because it's the real analogy. It's not some warning light. It's the credit card bill. You've already spent that money. You, your family, your spouse, your kids, they already rang up that account. And the only responsible thing to do is to pay the bill. And by the time you get to the bill, it's too late to talk about the spending. Let's face facts that the debt ceiling has become a political cudgel rather than some sort of useful policy tool. So those of us who are worried about debt and deficit shouldn't just talk about whether this is good or bad. It's clearly not doing the job. Let's talk about something new. And I think a lot of my good colleagues on the Democratic side support repealing the debt ceiling limit altogether. And I think there's good reason for that, because it is an artificial tool. It carries too much risk to be used for political games. But I don't think one of my Republican colleagues just thinks we can get rid of it. So last year, I just want to let you know, I teamed up with Congressman Jody Arrington and the Bipartisan Policy Center to craft and introduce the Responsible Budgeting Act. So this bill would eliminate the danger of debt limit brinksmanship and offers Congress two ways to actually deal with the national debt. First, we would pass a budget resolution that satisfies specific debt reduction measures, while simultaneously passing a joint resolution that the president can sign to suspend the debt limit until the next fiscal year. And then if Congress fails to pass that concurrent budget resolution, the second option allows the president to suspend the debt ceiling, him or herself, which Congress could vote to override. And with the suspension, the president's obligated to send a debt reduction proposal to the Hill. Congress would have to consider that proposal or come up with something of its own. It's a little bit complex, but it's...
And he basically asked for a timeline for security guarantees, alluding to NATO membership. Would you be willing to give him such guarantees at this point, or how do you react to that? And Congressman Schiff, you said that Ukraine's struggle is your struggle. Volodymyr Zelensky said, there is, in the 21st century, there is no more not my war. So would Ukraine's war also be your war?
Let me just say that we represent a small fraction of our congressional delegation, because they told us only 4 people could fit in the room. But we've had leaders from the Armed Services Committee, from the Foreign Armed Services Committee, self-described, and the Foreign Affairs Committee, which has jurisdiction over sanctions, the Intelligence Committee, the other committees that have some play in all of this. And so we listened with great interest to President Zelensky's speech and presentation, really proclamation, and it was very courageous, and it was clear to understand when people said, why would he come here at a time of threat to his country? Well, he had a mission and he accomplished it. But it isn't for any one nation to be saying